Legislative Day. We stand for stopping the call for a constitutional convention. America is getting very close to having a constitutional convention, and there are people in South Carolina that stand against it. And so we've actually brought in Joanna Martin into South Carolina to speak about the need to stop this call for an Article 5 convention. South Carolina actually applied for this convention last year. North Carolina is on its way to applying for this convention, and it's not a good idea to call this convention. And so Joanna Martin is on a speaking tour in South Carolina. She spoke in Myrtle Beach yesterday, and she's going all the way through the state, and she will be speaking in Greenville, South Carolina, and Spartanburg and Camden the remainder of the week. So Joanna, thank you for being here. She's a former litigation attorney, a former JAG officer in the military, and she's done an excellent job exposing those wanting to call this convention all over our nation. And she's dedicated to this fight. She's one of my favorite American patriots. And anyways, we thank you for being here, Joanna.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. So, as you know, last year the South Carolina legislature passed an application for Congress to call an Article 5 convention. But the votes for the resolution were procured by false assurances and false claims. Legislators were told that we need a convention to get amendments to our Constitution to rein in the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. But that was false. Our Constitution already limits the federal government to a handful of enumerated powers. But everyone ignores it. When state and local governments, businesses, hospitals, farmers, and the people take federal money to participate in unconstitutional federal programs, all of them are ignoring the existing constitutional limits on federal power. Our Constitution doesn't need fixing. We have a moral problem. We wanted free money from the federal government. 2, legislators were told that the convention is controlled from start to finish by state legislatures, but that was false. Article 5 authorizes state legislatures to apply to Congress for Congress to call the convention. Once that's done, state legislatures have nothing more to do with the convention. Article 5 vests in Congress the powers to call the convention, and Article 1, Section 8, last clause, vests in Congress the power to make the laws necessary and proper to carry out its power to call the convention. 3, legislators were told that they would select and control the delegates to the convention, but that was false. Congress has constitutional authority to make the laws which determine the number and selection process for delegates. And in Congress's preparations for a convention in the past, Congress has indicated that they will provide for the popular election of delegates. 4, legislators were told that Congress can't call a convention until Congress gets applications from 34 state legislatures asking for the same amendment, and that delegates can't consider anything but amendments requested by 34 state legislatures. But that was false. Con legislation filed in Congress last July indicates that Congress is likely to count all non-rescinded applications together. So, an application filed in New York during 1789 is likely to be counted with applications filed in 1861 to avert the Civil War, with applications filed in 1901 for the popular election of U.S. senators with more recently filed applications for a balanced budget amendment, term limits, etc., to get to 34 states applying for a convention. 5. Legislators were told that anything which comes out of a convention can't take effect unless it's ratified by 3/4 of the states. But that was false. Delegates have the power, recognized by our Declaration of Independence, to throw off the present system of government and propose a new constitution which creates a new form of government and which has its own mode of ratification. The Federal Convention of 1787 was called by the Continental Congress for the sole and express purpose of revising the Articles of Confederation. But the delegates ignored their instructions and wrote a new constitution which created a new government and which had a new mode of ratification, an easier mode. New constitutions are already prepared. The Constitution for the new states of America sets up a totalitarian dictatorship. It is ratified by a referendum called by the President. The Constitution for the new Socialist Republic in North America is proposed by the Revolutionary Communist Party, USA. The National Constitution Center is a quasi-official agency of the federal government. They hosted a constitution drafting project and proposed 3 new constitutions: the Progressive Constitution, the Libertarian Constitution, and the so-called Conservative Constitution. The so-called Conservative Constitution was co-authored by Robert P. George, who was a member of Mark Meckler's COS Legal Advisory Board. It grants new powers to a new federal government and imposes gun controls with red flag confiscations. Mark Meckler claims that his COS organization is a grassroots organization funded by grandmas sending him $5 checks out of their paltry monthly incomes with little notes attached saying they wish they could give more. But the tax form 990s filed by Meckler's COS organizations, which he signs as president, show he's funded primarily by donors who each give his organizations up to $2 million a year. Why does big money want to get their hands on our Constitution? The task force report on the North American Union was sponsored by the Council on Foreign Relations. This provides for the political integration of Canada, the United States, and Mexico. A parliament is to be set up over Canada, the United States, and Mexico. This is altogether repugnant to our existing Constitution. In order to institute the North American Union, they must get rid of our existing Constitution. To get rid of it, they need a new Constitution for the United States. To get a new Constitution, they need an Article 5 convention. And 2 members of the Council on Foreign Relations, Robert P. George and C. Boyden Gray, have been on Meckler's COS Legal Advisory Board since its inception in 2014. An Article 5 convention is extremely dangerous. This is why 4 U.S. Supreme Court justices, 2 liberals and 2 conservatives, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and a host of legal scholars warn against it. And James Madison expressly warned that those who secretly wish for a new constitution would push for an Article 5 convention under the pretext of just getting amendments. This danger was concealed from legislators. We ask them now to support a resolution to rescind the application South Carolina passed last year. There is no time to use. The enemies of our Constitution are pushing Congress to call a convention now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanna. And so we're asking the South Carolina State Legislature to rescind this last year's call for an application and to stop even considering new applications for calling an Article 5 convention. And I have behind me John Perna. John Perna has been one of our top patriots in South Carolina exposing this call for a convention. He spoke at committee meetings for years, letting people know what's wrong with this idea of calling an Article 5 convention. And I'm going to give him a few minutes to speak real quick.
People need to understand why a constitutional convention is so dangerous. We are quite accustomed to dealing with legislation and asking the question, is it constitutional? That's because every single legislative body in this country operates under the Constitution, except for a constitutional convention. A constitutional convention operates above the Constitution and is convened specifically for the purpose of making changes in the Constitution, which means that the question as to whether or not what they do is constitutional will never be raised, because they will supersede the Constitution with whatever they do. And we are told that we can limit what they do, that we can put a restriction on the Constitutional Convention. But the fact of the matter is, there is no authority that is higher than that of the Constitutional Convention. So there is no body, legislative, executive, or judicial, that has authority to limit a Constitutional Convention. If you want to get a good idea for what a limited Constitutional Convention is, just go into your bank this afternoon and tell them that you think they should go home today with all the doors of the bank standing wide open and the vault standing wide open, but they should put a sign on the front of the bank that says no one is allowed to steal that money. Now, when you do that, your bank will give you a very good explanation of what a limited constitutional convention is. When they tell you what they think of your suggestion, you will know exactly what a limited constitutional convention is. The analogy that I give is a question, which is, where does a 600-pound gorilla sleep? And the answer is anywhere he wants. And that's exactly what we've got when we convene a constitutional convention. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Those are some great words of wisdom, great teachings on the understanding of what actually would happen at an Article 5 convention. It's a very dangerous thing for South Carolina to be applying for, and that's why we're here today for South Carolina Stop a Con Legislative Day. We want to stop the con. There's many in this state house that have supported it. We want them to change their minds. We want them to support rescission, and many of us who are American patriots are going to do all that we can to make sure rescission bill gets through South Carolina, so that once again the state stands against the call for an Article 5 convention. Thank you for watching.